February 16, 2024. Inside an ordinary family home, an 8-year-old boy sat watching television. For him, it was just another evening. A familiar room, a familiar television, the kind of place where an 8-year-old child should never have a reason to feel afraid. But sometime that night, someone approached him, and within minutes, everything changed. The child was struck with a heavy object. Then came the knife. Again and again. By the time the attack was over, the ordinary room had become a horrifying crime scene. Blood covered the floor and marked parts of the room. The violence was so extreme that investigators would later recover a kitchen knife with its blade reportedly bent. But the brutality wasn't the most disturbing part of what police were about to uncover. Because this didn't appear to be a simple robbery, and investigators would eventually begin looking much closer to home, toward two women, a relationship stretching back years, a phone that mysteriously went silent during a critical period, and then, for only around 20 seconds, it came back to life. 20 seconds, a tiny digital trace. That would become an important lead in the investigation into the death of an 8-year-old child. But this story didn't begin on February 16. To understand how everything reached this point, we need to go back to when this was still just a family, and this little boy had no idea what was coming. Years earlier, long before police cars surrounded the family home, before investigators began studying phone records, and before two women found themselves at the center of a murder investigation, there was a relationship. The boy's mother had known another woman for years. Their connection began before the events that would eventually bring their names into headlines. Life, however, moved forward. The boy's mother married. She began building a family, and eventually, she had a son. The other woman also married years later, but according to reports, that marriage ended in separation shortly afterward. And despite everything that had changed in their lives, the two women remained in contact. Investigators would later allege that their relationship was more than friendship. But for now, that part of the story remained hidden. Meanwhile, an 8-year-old boy was growing up in what appeared from the outside to be an ordinary household. He was a 4th grade student. He lived with his mother and father. And there was one more member of the family, Shadow, their dog. For the child, this was simply home. These were the people around him every day. This was the environment where he should have been safest. There was no way he could have understood that the relationships between the adults around him would soon become part of a homicide investigation. Then, February 16th arrived, the night of the murder. That evening, the boy was inside the house. He was watching television. What happened next can only be reconstructed from the evidence and investigative accounts that followed. At some point, the child was attacked. The exact sequence of every strike has not been independently established through a publicly available final court judgment, but contemporary reporting described severe head injuries, sharp force wounds, and an extraordinarily violent scene. A kitchen knife recovered by investigators was reportedly bent. Heavy objects were examined as possible weapons, and when police entered the house, they were looking at a crime scene involving the death of a child who was only 8 years old. Imagine the question facing investigators. Why him? An 8-year-old child didn't have money, he didn't have a career, he didn't have adult enemies. So why would anyone direct this level of violence toward him? And perhaps more importantly, how had the attacker reached him inside his own home? Police began working outward. They examined possible disputes. They looked into rumors involving people outside the family. Different possibilities had to be checked. At the beginning of a homicide investigation, you don't simply decide who the killer is. You follow what the evidence gives you. And slowly, the evidence began pointing investigators back toward the house itself. The first strange detail wasn't a fingerprint. It wasn't DNA. It wasn't CCTV. It was a dog. Shadow, the dog that didn't bark. According to neighbors cited in reports, Shadow normally reacted to unfamiliar visitors. A stranger approaching the house could attract his attention. Sometimes, his barking. Yet around the period in which the child was killed, neighbors reportedly didn't recall hearing the reaction they might have expected from Shadow. That raised a question. Could the person who entered the home have been someone the dog already knew? It was only a possibility. A dog's behavior cannot identify a murderer. It cannot establish guilt, and it certainly isn't forensic evidence. But then, something else involving Shadow caught attention. The day after the killing, the child's mother reportedly tried to give the dog biscuits. Shadow refused. He moved away. And according to media reporting, the mother spoke to him. She reportedly asked whether Shadow was still angry with her, and asked him to forgive her. By itself, that meant nothing legally. A grieving person can behave in ways that appear strange to outsiders. Shock doesn't have one predictable form. But investigators weren't going to rely on the behavior of a dog anyway, because somewhere inside the digital records connected to this case, there was a much more interesting clue waiting for them. A phone. The phone that went dark. Investigators began examining communication records surrounding the night of the murder. One particular phone caught their attention. It belonged to the mother's longtime female friend. During an important period surrounding the crime, the phone was reportedly switched off. There are countless innocent reasons for a phone to be turned off. A dead battery, no signal, privacy, or simply choice. So that alone proved nothing. But investigators examined the technical records more closely. And then, they noticed something. During that critical period, the phone reportedly came back online. Not for an hour, not even for several minutes, for approximately 20 seconds. And during that tiny window, according to reporting on the police investigation, there was communication involving the child's mother. Then the phone went dark again, 20 seconds, that was it. But now investigators had questions. Why had the phone been switched off? Why had it suddenly come online? Why for such a short period? And why was there contact involving these two women during that brief window? The phone didn't tell police who had killed the child, but it gave them something extremely valuable. A direction. Investigators began looking deeper into the relationship between the two women. They examined communication patterns. They began reconstructing movements. And surveillance footage from the surrounding area became increasingly important. That footage would add another piece to the puzzle. The woman on camera. As police reviewed CCTV footage, they reportedly identified a woman moving near the area surrounding the child's home. Investigators believed that woman was the mother's longtime friend. Reports described her face as being partially concealed. Now consider what investigators were looking at. A child had been killed inside his home. The family's dog reportedly hadn't reacted as expected to a stranger. A woman closely connected to the child's mother had a phone that was reportedly switched off during a crucial period. That phone briefly came online. There was contact involving the mother, and police believed CCTV placed that same friend near the area. Still, circumstantial evidence has to be treated carefully. One strange detail can have an innocent explanation. Two can still be coincidence. What investigators needed to know was whether all of these pieces belonged to the same story. So they started asking questions. Separately, the child's mother was questioned. Her longtime friend was questioned. Police compared what each woman said about her movements, her communications, and the events surrounding February 16. And according to investigators, their accounts didn't fully match. Now the case had changed. Police were no longer simply searching for an unknown attacker somewhere outside the family. They were looking closely at two women already connected to the child's life. And 4 days after the murder, investigators made their move. February 20th, 2024. Police arrested two women. Until this point in our story, we have deliberately kept their identities hidden, because this is the moment investigators publicly brought those identities into the case. The first woman was the child's own mother. Her name was Shanta Sharma. The second woman was the longtime friend whose relationship with Shanta had come under increasing scrutiny. Iffat Parveen. The arrest of a child's own mother immediately changed how people viewed the case. But an arrest still didn't answer the biggest question. Why? Why would police believe these two women were connected to the brutal death of an 8-year-old boy? The answer investigators proposed was deeply personal and deeply disturbing. The alleged secret. Police said Shanta and Iffat had known each other for years. Investigators alleged that the two women maintained an intimate relationship. Their individual lives had changed. There had been marriages, a child had been born, years had passed, but according to police, the relationship between them continued. Then investigators introduced what they believed could have been the immediate trigger. According to the police theory reported at the time, the 8-year-old boy had become aware of the relationship. Some reports describing the investigation alleged that the child had seen the two women together in a compromising situation. Police believed there was concern that he could tell his father, or other family members, what he had seen, and investigators alleged that the child was killed to prevent that from happening. Think about what that allegation means. An 8-year-old child, possibly understanding something he wasn't supposed to know, and becoming, according to the police theory, a threat to a secret maintained by adults around him. But this distinction matters. That was the police's allegation. It was not, by itself, a court-proven fact. Neither the alleged relationship, nor the alleged motive, should be used to skip the most important requirement in a murder case: proof. Police still had to connect their theory to evidence. And the two accused women still had legal rights. The courtroom. On February 21st, one day after the arrests, Shanta Sharma and Iffat Parveen were brought before court. Investigators wanted additional time with both women. The court granted 9 days of police custody. Shanta reportedly denied knowledge of the murder. The defense challenged the case being built against the accused, and there was a major reality investigators had to confront. There was no publicly reported eyewitness who had stood inside the room and watched the entire attack unfold. Instead, the early publicly reported case involved a collection of circumstances, phone records, CCTV, statements investigators considered inconsistent, reported behavioral observations, and forensic evidence collected from the scene. Each clue could potentially matter, but a criminal case isn't supposed to be decided by which story sounds the most shocking. Evidence has to withstand examination. After their police custody ended, both accused were sent into judicial custody, and from there, the legal process continued. But there is one final part of this story we intentionally haven't told you. Where did all of this happen? For the entire investigation, we've kept the location hidden, not because the place itself caused what happened, but because this case could initially sound as though it came from almost anywhere. An ordinary home, a child watching television, a family dog, two people hiding an alleged relationship, a phone going dark, a CCTV camera recording someone passing nearby. But this case happened in India, more specifically, in the Kannaipur Adarshnagar area of Konnagar, in West Bengal's Hooghly district. And even today, there is a reason to be careful when telling this story. Contemporary reports didn't always agree on every detail. Even the child's name appeared in different forms across coverage, including Snehanshu, Snehanshu, Shreyanshu, and Shreyanshu Sharma. Some of the most dramatic claims surrounding the case came from investigative allegations reported by the media, not from a publicly available final judgment. And based on reliable publicly indexed reporting reviewed for this documentary, a later final court judgment conclusively establishing the ultimate outcome could not be independently verified. That means Shanta Sharma and Iffat Parveen should not simply be called convicted killers. They were the two women police accused in connection with the child's death. And whatever the eventual legal outcome, one fact sits beyond all of the mystery: the phone records, the CCTV, and the allegations. An 8-year-old child went from sitting safely inside his own home to becoming the victim at the center of a homicide investigation. And somewhere among all the evidence investigators examined, one of the smallest details became one of the most memorable: a phone that was supposed to be silent, coming back to life, for just 20 seconds.